if you remember, we were in the middle of discussing this fertility trend in Korea, and fertility trend in Korea, and the important role played by the Korean government, and the Korean government intervened in this decision-making process of having children. How many children should a couple have, right? So we have thought that we have seen these posters, how the government is trying to persuade the Korean people to have less children. In the 1960s, family planning was strongly emphasized, contraceptions, right? Contraceptives, and limiting the number to 2. Stuck. Okay, thank you. And then in the 1980s, 2 is too much, right? And showing that there's kind of going to be global explosion of population in Korean Peninsula. Family planning process in the 1990s. Okay, one of the major issues in Korean family planning, that is the sex ratio issue. So the boys, there's too many. There's high sex ratio. There's too many males per female, leading to some problem even at elementary school level. Okay. And then in the 2000, we see some great shift in this family planning and population policies. On the left side, 1, 2, 3 movement. 1, 2, 3 movement. What does 1 represent? So Murak, do you read Korean now? I'm trying. Okay, yeah. Can anyone translate this for us? Yeah. Number 1 represents?
Have a baby, or being pregnant within a year.
Yeah, within a year, let's get pregnant.
And
within 1 year period of marriage. So because many couples, even after marriage, they would kind of defer the pregnancy. So from the government perspective, well, if you get married, let's have baby. Okay, that's 1 within 1 year. 2.
Have 2 babies?
Yes, 2 children, right? So quite a radical shift from the previous policy, right? That's they said 2 is enough, 2 is too much, and let's have 1 and so on. And then now they're saying, well, let's have 2 babies. And then number 3.
And before 35 years old?
Let's have babies before you get 35. Before 35, right? So, because the later the woman have baby, there'll be less chance of having more babies. Let's try to have the babies while the mother is young. So that's like, in a systemic way, the Korean government was telling the couple, especially married women, to have babies. 2 babies within a year before it's too late. Okay, it's like a very different message from the 1970s. And then on the right, with this picture of happy family, dad and mom and two children, right? And it says, 아빠 혼자는 싫어요. Okay, that dad, I don't want to be alone. Mom, let me have a sibling. Okay, so it's like it's kind of like appealing to the parents that the child should have a sibling. And then these are the most recent ones. On the left, 한 자녀보다는 둘, 둘보다는 셋. 하나, 둘, 셋, 이얼산, right? 이얼산, yeah. 1, 2, 3, yeah. So it's kind of basically telling that the more the better. Okay, 2 is happier than one child. 3 children is more happier than 2 children. Okay, so very strong message to have more kids. And then on the right, how many candles do you have here? Okay, how many candles? How many candles do you see here on the right? The poster on the right. Do you see the poster right? Huda. Okay. How many candles? 우. 이어산수 우. Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really trying to push my Chinese before I go to China. Yeah. Okay. So 5 candles, and it says many candles are much brighter than 1 candle. So encouraging people to have as many babies as possible, and that will make the society and family happier and brighter and so on. Very difficult. I mean, so having more children from social perspective, from Korean society perspective, it's very important. So even though there are many factors which would discourage the couple to have children, the government is trying to say that, well, have more babies, right? Even though I would say that it's not been very successful, as successful as it was in the 1960s and 70s when they were sending different messages that let's limit the number of children. Okay. So what are the reasons for this very low birth rate despite recent government effort to have more children? I think it's quite obvious, right? Number one, government policy in the 1960s and 70s, right? The very efficient family planning program. Government was using various messages from posters to actual sterilization program to limit the number of children. So initial driver of this change has been the Korean government and very strong and efficient family planning program. Okay. And in a more sociological perspective, another very important factor is, of course, the age of first marriage. We'll see later on that nowadays the couples who get married are much older than maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And as couples get married very late, or women get married late, there will be fewer years for getting pregnant. Because that's the age of first marriage is a very important factor in deciding the number of children. Not that alone, but it's a very important, one of the main factors in determining the fertility rate. And another factor is, of course, increase in female education. You'll be very surprised that college attendance rate in the 1980s. For example, can you guess what was the college attendance rate of Koreans in general in the 1980s, early 1980s? Now it's about 80%. That is, about 80% of Korean high school graduates go to college, 78, 80%. In the 1980s, the number was, can you guess? Can you guess who that? It's about 40%. It was about 40%. It was still, comparatively speaking, quite high. About 40% of high school graduates went to college. But if you if you look at the number from gender perspective, the female student attending college was much lower. It was 20-some%, less than 30% of the females who graduated from high school went to college in the early 1980s. Okay? Then what happened? Nowadays, in the 2000s, college attendance rate is about 80%, and there's no gender difference. Both males and females, almost 80% of them go to college. Okay, so that is very important. Right? Females get more education. That means a lot. Okay, can you tell what would be the impact of this new change? As more females go to college, what would happen? Any? Okay, Thilo.
I guess maybe they want to start a career and concentrate on their career instead of having children. They will have less time for them before they finish with university and everything. So yeah, they're going to get children later, and maybe because they want to pursue their career. Maybe they're not going to have any children, or maybe just like one child or something. Yeah.
Very important. They in many respects. That is, yes. In the past, they graduate from high school, maybe work a few years, and then get married and have children, family, right? But as you get higher education, it's more likely they would pursue their professional career. Okay, so they participate in the labor market, they get better jobs, and they pursue their career, right? And they would delay their marriage, and they probably would delay having a child. It's a very kind of like cumulative effect on the pregnancy, right? And also, as you're better educated, you would kind of question the very institution of marriage. Now, is it really important for myself? Well, marriage has various social implications, and some would argue that this is kind of like legacy of male dominant institution. Why should I, get married and follow this role of daughter-in-law and things like that? So it's kind of reflective process get involved as you have better education. So that the kind of very important social aspect of having better education. And of course, very simple mathematics, that is, you have 4 more years of education, and there will be less years for being pregnant before you get out of high school at the 18, 19. Theoretically, you can get married then, but now it's theoretically you would have to wait for another 4 years. So it's a very obvious factor in terms of deciding the number of having babies. So female education is a very important factor. No, and it's you get enlightened and you begin to question the whole process of marriage and having children and so on. And so in that respect, it's a very important factor for low birth rate. And of course, female labor market participation. In the even in the mid-1980s, many females, if we ask, what do you want to do after your education? Many females would answer, Do you read, right? Can you see? 안 보이네, 칠판은? In Chinese, 관모, okay. Is there an expression like this in China?
Yeah, same. Just pronounce it.
Yeah.
贤母良妻. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks. It's very nice to have him here. Okay, 현모양처, which is like a wise mother and good wife. So it was actually, if you ask high school graduates, females, that what's your future dream? What do you want to become? Many, quite a significant, even college graduates. For example, I remember that there was kind of survey of Ewha Women's University students, like what's your future? Maybe some say that they would like to become like diplomats, some say they would like to become a professional lawyer and so on. But quite a significant number of this Ewha Women's University student will say that I want to be 현모양처. I want to be a good, a wise mother and good wife. So there was like many females did not really seriously consider getting a job. If you're middle class, well educated, you would kind of prepare to become a good mother and wife. Okay, so, but there was radical cultural, social change in the 1980s and 1990s, and more females began to think that getting a job is more important than become a housewife. So that means that they will have maybe less chance of getting married, or and then getting less chance of having children. Okay, so female labor market participation. I would say that today, if you ask female students at KU, I would say none of you would say that I want to become, right? Is there anyone who want to become after graduating from college in this classroom? I would be very skeptical, right? Everyone would like to pursue their career, having a good job, maybe well-paid and socially respected job. Okay, so it's a big change over the past maybe 20, 30 years. And of course, another factor is that children have become major expense than a set, right? It's financially very difficult to bring up a child or two children. Okay, according to I think it was Benedict Anderson, like an anthropological research, each society has different timing, different age when a child become an asset than expense. That is, children play some important economic role for household economy. So like according to this research, I think like in Papua New Guinea, for example, maybe if the child becomes 6 or 7 year old, he or she contribute greatly to the family economy by collecting woods and maybe taking care of the sisters and brothers and so on. So plays an important role, the family as an economic unit. let me ask, like, at what age you're making some economic contribution to your family? That's my question, okay? Let me address the question again. At what age have you or will you become contribute plus in terms of money or whatever to your family that is organized by your parents, right? So that's a very interesting question. Do you like contribute financially to your family at the moment? Maybe not, right? Yeah, you're just smiling, and I think in modern society, especially in Korea, most of it's very, I guess, we have to confess. I have to confess. It's very expensive to have 2 children and provide education, and not only like tuition for college and so on, but also private tutorings and so on, right? 학원, so-called 학원, this educational expense and everything else. So maybe even after you go to college, you'll be very highly dependent upon your parents. You wouldn't really bring in some money to your family economy, right? It's like your parents probably will have to pay most of your expense, right? And what happens? You go to job market, you get jobs, right? And then, yeah, maybe you would earn some money, but you will have to get married, right? And then getting married, having a marriage, a wedding is very expensive again, and I don't think you can really fully financially support your own marriage and like housing and so on. So probably your parents would have to arrange the wedding and like maybe housings for the couples and so on. So my senior professors started saying there was just endless like financial support for their children. So they would, so if like one of my senior in our department, he had his child get married a couple of years ago. So I said, well, congratulations, it's the end of your responsibility as father. He said, no, it's endless until you die. You have to provide after service to the married couple, continuously providing. And then what happens is like if you have grandchildren, it's very important that you have you be good grandfather. So you'll have to like provide some financial support. I don't know. I mean, maybe not for like all social class, but at least for middle or upper middle class, it seems like this financial responsibility of the parents or even grandparents are quite expected, or is like there's a kind of pressure from the perspective of the parents to do their role financially. So I think it's kind of like obvious that it's very expensive to have children, and there's kind of socially shared pressure on this, and many people think that it's unfair, it's like it's a problem and so on, but the kind of like is continuing. Yes, it's quite challenging. So people will say, well, if you have third child, I don't know, in this, okay, so I wouldn't name his real name, but there is like professor in the School of Journalism, School of Media. There's a professor who has 4 children, and I always say to him that you're very rich. You must be very rich. It's like it's a symbol of your wealth and social status to have 4, not even 3. Third child is usually said that third child is like a symbol of your social status, and you have 4, and you must be very, very rich, and you should be upper class. But I mean, it's like we think that just having 2 is quite a financial burden, right? And so that means that socially it's very expensive. So the couple would have to limit when they were having another child. They would have to consider that can I financially support my child? Okay. And of course, another factor is like in terms of policy, they say that it's like there's a lack of child care system. Right? So if you have a child and then you have to go to job and like there's not enough child care system, support system. So what happens is that actually many couples actually, the working couples would have to rely on private child care system. When I say private or maybe personal private care system, what do I mean by that? Yeah. Yes, you're right. Okay.
Grandparents.
Yes, grandparents. That's private child care system, right? Grandparents. Yes. So it's like family network is very important, and it's usually the role of maybe grandmother, either a mother-in-law or mother of the housewife to the women in the family. So it's like socially quite burdensome because like it's not all, but it's like nowadays the government is investing a lot of money to develop the child care system, but still compared to many Western countries, it's very insufficient, and it falls upon the couples and their families to take care of the children. So it's another factor that kind of limit the possibility of having more children. Okay. This is a graph of the mother's age, as I said, for various reasons, because of education, because of labor market participation, women are delaying their age of first marriage and age of having the first child, So from 1997 to 2007, it's like trend, 10-year trend. It shows 10-year trend, right? On the left, you can see that number of babies. This shows that you have to add up the mother's age, and the black dot line represents the 30s. The mother's age are in the 30s, and this dot with a hole is like their age of mothers were 20s. First of all, this graph shows that number of mothers were much higher in the 1997. It's pretty obvious, right? 200,000 mothers had baby in 1997. 200 mothers who were 30 years old had babies in 1997, plus about 500,000 mothers who were in the 20s in 1997. On the very left, right? You add up, you probably have about 700,000 mothers in 1997 who had babies in 1997. In 2007, the total number have decreased. About 200,000 mothers were in the 20s, right? And about maybe less than 300,000 mothers were in the 30s. So maybe you have about 500,000 mothers. That shows that less mothers, less women have become mothers. Okay, that's first obvious fact from this graph. And then another important phenomenon here is that you have this reversal of mother group in terms of age. That is, there are more mothers who were in the 30s than the mothers who were in the 20s. In 1997, mothers were dominantly in the 20s, but you can see in 2007, it's the black dot. That is, mothers who are in the 30s, the number exceeds the mothers who are in the 20s. So you see this kind of change in terms of age of the mothers. That is, they get pregnant, they have babies later on than 10 years ago. Another graph. In the middle, that's blue. Is it like? I'm not sure if you can see it very clearly, but the blue that's on the left in 2000, the blue represents the mean, the average for all children. So for all mothers, it was about 29 years old when they had babies. When they had baby, it was about 31-year-old in 2010. So it kind of shows a general trend of mothers being aged. They have their babies at later years, right? And then obviously, the first baby, the average age of the first baby when the average age of mother when she had first baby, that's red line, right? Average age of mother when she had first baby, that's red line on the very bottom. Okay, so in 2000 they were about 27.7 years old. Now it's about 30. The first baby, so that shows that the very age of the first baby, the age of the mother when she had first baby getting delayed. And then, of course, second and third and fourth, you got older and older, which is quite natural. You have first baby, and then maybe in a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, the mother would get more aged, right? So that's pretty obvious in this graph. 미안합니다. This is a kind of comparative. This provides comparative perspective. Mother's age at first delivery, right? That is, what is the age of the mother when she had first baby? On the very right, that is the oldest for the mother, oldest mother when she had first baby, and that's Ingwo. 맞나요? Yeah. UK, England, right? The probably Scotland. I don't know. Probably similar to UK. Yeah. So looks like the women in UK would kind of delay their first baby, until about 30 years old. 30 years old. And then Germany, where Thilo is coming from, Italy, Spain, Swiss, Korea is ranked about number seven. Okay, and then OECD countries, other countries, Japan, Netherlands, Greece, France, Denmark, and then on the very left is Mexico. Really, really young, about 21 years old. Then they would have a baby. Okay, it's a very, very different in trend. Different. Yeah. Where's China? Oh, there's no China here. China 없죠 여기? Yeah. I'm sorry, there's no China here, but homework. Okay. Homework. Please provide Chinese statistics on the next class. Okay. Sure. Okay. 부탁할게요. Okay. My favor. Please provide the data. Try to find some data for China. What would be the age of mother when a Chinese woman had first baby? Okay. I'm very curious. Okay, next issue in the population change is aging. Aging does not mean that people live longer years. Aging at social level is a function of two variables. Number one, low fertility rate. Number two, extended life expectancy. That is, on the one hand, at the social level, two phenomena or two variables will play to make this variable called aging. So low fertility rate, that is, Korea does have a very low fertility rate. There's no more, the number of babies, newborn babies are very low. Okay. And then also you have people living much longer. That leads to aging. So if either of the variable changes, you can actually control the aging process. That is, if you have high fertility rate, that will kind of slow down the aging process. Or if you have people die younger, actually you can slow down the aging process of a society. But in reality, it's impossible. So what you can do is you can only have some policies for fertility rate. That's why the Korean government has been doing various efforts, investing a lot of money to the research groups and so on, to increase the fertility level. Okay, because that's the only way that actually you could slow down the aging of Korean society. Age structure in 2007 in Korea was about, looked like this. 0 to 14, 18.0%. 15 to 64, 70.0%. People who are older than 65 was 9.9%. But this is going to be growing. The number, that is percentage of people who are over 65 will grow very rapidly, and by 2019 we'll have 14.4%. In 2026 we'll have about 20% who are older than 65. In terms of the age pyramid, okay, it looked like this, and it will look like this in the future. In 1960, the graph on the picture on the very left, top left, shows 1960, and the vertical line is the age from 0, 5, 10, 15 to 75, 80. Okay? And the right triangle is female, left triangle is male. The left side is male and right side is female. It's rather balanced. Okay? And then the whole structure is very stable triangle. That is, we have very high percentage of young people, 0 to 5, 0 to 10. There are many young people. But by 2010, the share, the number of the young population has decreased, disappeared, right? So you can say that these people have just disappeared. And then by 2020 and by 2030, you will have kind of maybe sort of reversed triangle, which means that you'll have high share of people who are 55, over 60, 65, and so on, which means that this younger generation, or at least economically vital people who are from 15 to 65 or 20 to 60, their share will be very low. And it will be very difficult for this young generation to maintain the economic dynamism of Korea, and also providing all kind of social and financial support for the older generation. So it's a very big problem. That's why many experts are trying to use this demographic techniques, and then try to develop some policies to increase the share of the younger generation. But very unfortunately, this trend looks like it's going to be continue in the future, unless there's some significant changes, such as maybe reunification of Korea or whatever. So it's even though government is trying to use more conventional efforts, that is to persuade the young couples to have more babies, it has not been very efficient. I heard that Chinese is also probably will face this aging, this demographic change could be a very important factor that could be an obstacle for continuous economic growth of China. Yeah, I'm not an expert on Chinese population, but I think that could be another very important factor. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Aging, as I said, well, about 9.9% of Koreans who are over 65. It's not that bad at the moment. That bad at the moment. But what scares Koreans is that this aging is taking place very, very, very rapidly. In terms of categorizing the nations, the term aging, aged, and super-aged society is used. Aging society, aged society, and super-aged society. 7%, if a society has people who are over 65, more than 7%, that's called aging society. And then if the share, the percentage of people who are over 65 exceeds 14%, that's called aged society. And then if a society have a population 65 plus, more than 20%, not 21, but 20%, then that society is called super aged society. This table shows some changes, this aging of different countries in the world. France has become the first aging society, that is population 65 plus, more than 7%. In 1864, long time ago, France was the first country in the world to become, aging society. But it took 154 years to become aged society. Okay, it's a very gradual, slow process. So maybe society could kind of counter this kind of changes. Sweden, 127 years. That's very right column, right? USA, 94%, and so on. And Japan, as you may have guessed, is the country that has become, that's really being aged. In 1970, it became aged society, first country in Asia. And then in 1994, not long ago, has become the aged society. And then in 2006, for the first time in the world, Japan was the first country in the world to become super aged society. It took only 36 years. In terms of becoming, as for France, it will take 154 years to become super aged society, from aging society to super aged society. Okay, France has not become super aged. It will become a super aged society in 2018. It's kind of prediction. Japan is the only country that has become a super aged society in 2006, and it took, in real numbers, in reality, only 36 years. From 1970 to 2006, only during 36 years, it has become super aged society, very, very old. And you'll see that Japan, there's kind of some scholars in development studies argue that there's no future for Japan because of this demographic structure. There's no economic future because they're so old, and there's no policies to kind of reverse this change. Korea will be really catching up, actually, in competition with Japan. Korea is really always tried to break the record, right? So we'll just in 26 years, we'll become the super aged society. So it will break the record. 36 years was the world record, if there is such thing as world records for getting old. But it took only 36 years for Japan to become from aging society to super aged society. Korea will break the record, and then just within 26 years, we will become the super aged society in 2026. So that's how serious this aging process is, and it will lead to all kind of social and economic problem if we don't have more babies, younger people who could actually continue the dynamics that we have enjoyed over the past maybe 30, 40 years. Okay, let's take a 7-minute break, and then we'll come back. Some serious questions. What will be the future of Korea? Okay, it's what are the solutions? Especially, these questions are addressed because the aging of Korean society is so serious a problem. It's so serious a problem. And the previous government and also this government by Lee Myung-bak has been trying to find some solutions to this. And most of our efforts, the Korean government efforts, has been to maybe invest more in child care system. So let the mothers help them to work while they have their young children. Okay, so they're providing maybe, also they were providing some incentives, some monetary compensation if a couple have 1 or 2 or 3 babies. It depends upon each local government, but there is kind of government efforts to provide some incentives for the young couples have babies. But as you can see, the total fertility rate, TFR, has not been very, increasing. It's kind of still staggering at 1.12, 1.13, and so on. So this is the question that I'm asking to you. What could be the solution to this very low fertility, which facilitates the aging of Korean society? Can anyone if you come up with some good answers, maybe I could tell the Korean government saying, well, this we have great solution. Yeah. Yeah, let's play with some ideas. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I think the government should be more focused on the childcare system, because a lot of parents think that even though they have babies, it'd be really hard for them to raise them, because usually these days both parents go to work. But you said, as you said, the grandparents, maybe the percentage of the grandparents who are capable of taking care of their grandchildren will not be, guaranteed, because so in a quantity perspective, government should increase not only the public but not only the private but the public factors of the childcare system, and also these days the quality of the childcare centers are being a big issue. So they should guarantee, like government-wise, for the parents to give their children to the childcare center.
Be more, in terms of quantity, more childcare system. Also in terms of quality, there should be more improvement for the teachers and so on. Yeah, I think that's very important, and I think that's one direction that government is trying to make some improvement. Any other? Let's try to, I guess, it's a social problem, right? It's a very important social issue, but at the same time, I think it's an issue that is more like real, especially for many females who have higher education and who would like to become a professional, continue to have a professional career. But at the same time, when I talk to my cousin, like she's like 27, working in a bank and so on, and she kind of like, she's not like, she doesn't want to be like single for the rest of her life. She said she would like to, find a good good man and then have a like happy family. But always there's a but. But and she kind of like thinks that it's a very difficult choice, and especially after like if you find a good man and then have a happy couple family, and then it's another very tough decision whether one she should have, because it's gonna be a very important disadvantage for her career. Some, as you know or might know, it's like if you get pregnant or have a baby, the companies are not very favorable for that kind of condition, even though they would not like explicitly say that, well, why don't you like take off? But they say that there's kind of social pressure that they should exit the labor market, and then it will be very difficult for her to re-enter the same level of labor market in terms of income or prestige. So it's I think this will be a very real problem for many of you who have good education, who would have promising a career and future. So I would like to hear, in that respect, from this very promising future career professional woman.
The solution of aging.
Any thought?
In Korea, aging. The reason of aging is low fertility rate and extended life expectancy. In terms of low fertility rate, I think almost people worried about the economic things. So we have to study and we have to work to make more money for our family and our several things. So the government and other company will have to give some economic support to yes. I think that is for most important.
Hello? Okay, yeah. I do too. Any? Yes, Jay. Yeah.
Okay, so since you were talking about how, like, in the workplace, it's really problematic for women to go back to their jobs. So maybe, like you were talking about more specific, or she was talking about more specifically, to provide ways for women to have like a stable maternity leave, and to be financially supported during that time. So I guess it would be a combination of like the government and the private sector, like working together to make that happen, and then to guarantee them a place back into the job that they left maybe. And also, this is just like a random interesting side note, but in Russia, because they also have a population decrease like problem, they have like a national fertility day or something. Yeah, I don't know if that's the exact wording, but it's something like that. And so if a couple has a baby within like the right time frame of that date. Like I think it's like a national holiday, so like you don't have work and stuff. And so if a couple has a baby within like the time frame of that date, like you get like household appliances and stuff, like fridges and stuff. Yeah, so it's interesting.
And I also think that right now the fertility rate, the decreasing fertility rate cannot be prevented. So I think you also have to think about the older people and find ways of how to expand their work ability. Well, because in some years there will be so many old people, but and no many young people. So you'll have to there will be work where you have to how do you say that? Oh, you have to yeah. For example, the retirement age, maybe you have to postpone that, and also think about the pension system, kind of renew it and stuff. I don't know.
Your suggestion is not directly about the fertility, but if this situation continues, one solution could be like maybe extending the retirement ages and older people working and so on, right? Yeah.
Like a few years ago, people were worrying about too many children, and now they're worrying about not. They try to make more children, but well, I mean, isn't that also a problem? Isn't that going to be a problem? Because when they're worrying right now about how to get more children, then in some years they will again worry about how to get less children. So it's going to be a problem again. Yeah.
Could be, but I think it will take maybe long years, and considering the current many factors that kind of restricts the number of children, it will be very difficult to have kind of another reversal of this shift. Yeah, the government could be very happy if that happens, but at the moment it's not really likely, I think. Yeah. Do you want to add?
I think it's kind of funny how just one part of the family has the responsibility, just the woman. But I mean, why do they always have to stay at home to look for the child and do like the housework? I mean, the husband could stay at home as well. So I think there's the idea that when you have a child, you're gonna work like just like half day. So if both but still you get paid like 75%. No, we don't have that. But this is it's like a concept. So I mean, both parents could work half day, but they would still earn like 75%. So they just have like a bit less than usual, and so they could both look after the child without having to leave their job completely. So I think this would be a good solution to. Yeah, I mean, I don't think like childcare is the thing to do, because would you really want to give your children away when they're like, I don't know, really, really small, like for the first years? I wouldn't want to give my children away in this age. And I think especially here, they're going to stay, I don't know, they're in school and like later in university for, I don't know, especially high school. They spend a lot of time there and like tutoring and stuff away from their parents as well. So I think they should stay with their parents in the early days. So I think childcare is not the best solution anyway. And maybe to explain it to the end, when you just earn like 75%, after your child goes to like kindergarten or something, you would still like then you would like work full time, but still get paid 75% to make up for it. Okay, yeah, it's like the concept.
Okay, thanks.
I think the main reason is about human labor, and our economy system is based on capital and financial technology, and efficiency and big profit is very important in our society than human. So status of labor is so unstable, so we don't expect our children will live a good life or even normal life. So I think if we don't change this paradigm of system, all of other methods would be superficial.
So you're suggesting more fundamental change, right? Yeah. That is. About the last comment, I think what you meant to say is that first of all, the parents are not very optimistic about the future of their children, so they would be kind of reluctant to have more children, because they might not have very good happy life, right? And maybe second of all, if I'm not mistaken, the whole society is like centered around the money and finance. Maybe there should be some paradigm shift to a more maybe sustainable paradigm, maybe not fully economic centered society, but more humane and more maybe other values should be emphasized, right? Okay, so that's a good, it's a very good comment. It's a critique of the Korean society, but I guess also at the same time there should be kind of a collective effort to have a social change in terms of the fundamentals of Korean society, which is a very important but at the same very difficult, I guess, yeah. But I think there is kind of effort by some Koreans who would like to pursue different lifestyles, trying to maybe, there are some people who move to the rural community, slow life and so on, and some alternatives, because we were on the very fast track, and I think some people begin to question that, this fast development, like moneyism, which emphasizes money and economic growth and so on, and some are trying to kind of like, well, probably family is more important. We are like probably, individual life is important than just working 12 hours for company and so on. So there are some efforts for alternative society and views. And then to the comments by others, I guess work is very important. I mean, there should be some change in work culture and system in Korea. So maybe, as Tilo said, maybe there could be both, maybe mother and father working less and taking care of the children, and then there should be some institutional change at the level of the company or labor markets, so let the young couples have more flexible, like working, especially when they have their children or child. Okay, and also in regard to Jaehee's comments about in Jae's comment, maybe there should be some systemic change for the company to encourage the women who have to leave because of the pregnancy, so let them to kind of re-welcome the important women who have contributed to the company, and that's a very significant change. I think it's if Korean society really take this issue of aging very serious problem, or this low fertility a serious problem, it should be the society, the government, the public sector, and companies that should, collectively try to do something about the system, rather than just, let the couples or let the individuals to, adjust to this system. Right? Okay. Thank you for very thoughtful comments. Okay, let's move on to another different issue. environmental issues, for this particular topic, please read a chapter written by Professor Yoon Sun-jin in Social Change in Korea, one of our textbooks. Professor Yoon Sun-jin of Seoul National University has an article on environmental issues in Korea. Well, paradigm shift, that was something that mentioned earlier. And I think Korea has been very dynamic in terms of economic development over the past 40 years. So we are much more affluent than we were 30, 40 years ago. Okay? So we earn more money, we drive cars, we have bigger apartments, bigger cars, and so on. That's great, but at the same time, maybe dark side of the economic growth has been the environmental issue, this ecological degradation, and so there has been, especially since 1980s, Koreans began to appreciate or reappreciate the environmental issues and so on. And what caused this change? In the 1980s, the middle class. 1980s was when Korean economy had this rapid development, income growth, and the rise of middle class. And this growing middle class, begin to get concerned about their environment, quality of life, and so on. Okay, so that's one important factor. Why do Koreans begin to get concerned and interest in an environment? Because these new actors, the middle class, yes, economy is important, but at the same time, I want to live in a better environment, in a better ecological condition. Another factor was in 1991, there was a phenol accident in Nakdong River, which is at the in the southeastern Gyeongsangdo area, southeastern part of Korea. Phenol, I don't know too much about this, like chemicals, but it's a very serious toxic material, and this was emitted by one of electronic companies, which was part of Doosan Jeonja, and so it was not really an accident in a sense, because it was raining and then the company just like tried to remove this phenol without paying some the taxes and so on. So it really contaminated water, and actually it led to the contamination of tap water in this area. So citizens were very concerned, and for the first time in Korean history, many Koreans began to really get threatened by this chemical. And so because it's like drinking water being contaminated by phenol, and so they were asking questions. What is this company doing? How are we going to have a better quality water? How are we going to help the water quality get better, and so on? That's a very important historical event which lead to the rise of environmental movement and concern about Korean environment. And so in the early 1990s, some environmental movement organizations began to formed by many citizens and citizen leaders. And one of the major organization is KFEM. KFEM stands for Korean Federation for Environmental Movement, KFEM. And this Korean Federation for Environmental Movement has become one of the largest environmental organizations in the world, actually. It has like a national federation. It has local chapters in almost every community. So they have become very efficient in terms of finding environmental problem, monitoring environmental quality, and raising the issues publicly, and so on. What do you see in this photo? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, that's actually socially constructed. Okay, that is, we thought this was great in the 1960s and 70s. Right? This like factories, the fumes from the factories, and actually, I forgot to get this excerpt, but I think it was in mid-1960s when President Park Chung-hee had written a kind of like statement in a monument nearby Ulsan factory. Ulsan is one of the big companies, a big industrial city. Is that when we observe these fumes from the factory, that's the day when we will have economic development and like industrial growth. We will be working hard for that day and so on. So it's like when there was like a special ceremony celebrating the completion of factory, he kind of gave a public statement saying that this factory and the fumes from the factory is kind of symbol of economic growth and industrial development. And we, thought, well, that's great. Let's have more factories and more. We didn't really think about the pollution. We thought that was just great part of the whole process. And another example of this social construction is that when I was young, when I was like a boy, like middle school, taking a bus is kind of very special experience, right? So we'll go to, we will visit our relatives, and we'll take a bus from Kuocw to Wangsimni, and then I really like the smell of this gasoline or like diesel. You take the bus; it's an old bus, so you can actually smell this like diesel or oil, and I feel like it was like kind of, wow, this is great. I mean, it's like I feel like I'm part of this like modern civilized. I still like it though. When I smell this, well, yeah, this is kind of reminds me of this my younger days and when we had this so-called economic growth. I mean, that's why I said it's kind of socially constructed, this kind of perception. And nowadays, when we see this photo, of course, we say, well, this is really bad for our, respiratory system and so on. But in those days, many Koreans believed that, well, we'll work hard, we will have development and economic growth and so on. And we didn't really think about the environmental problems. So that kind of attitude is actually a reflection of developmentalism. Developmentalism is kind of ideology that puts priority on development, and often that's measured in economic terms, such as GDP. The Korean government, from the early stages of economic growth, is well, we'll have certain amount of exports, per capita income of $1,000, and so we have kind of internalized this kind of ideas. Well, let's work hard, let's make more money, we'll have more factories, economic growth, and so on. And this kind of developmentalism was a very important part of ideas after decolonization, 1945, 1950, 1960s. It was not just in Korea, but it was kind of ideas that were spread throughout the world, especially many third world countries. They were developing, Egypt and like other many Asian and African countries, which have become an independent nation. They wanted modernization, development, and growth. Well, that kind of developmentalism was imported, if you will, or institutionalized in Korea as well under Park Chung-hee's regime, very strong state, as we have learned earlier when we were talking about economic growth. And then what happens was that in that kind of great mobilization for economic development and modernization, we began to consider nature and environment as an object that should be, used and exploited. In the previous days, I would say, pre-developmentalist era, we thought that nature and environment is very important part of us, and we Koreans are actually, the people are actually part of nature ecosystem. That was very important part of our ideas, maybe for the past couple thousand years, if you will, and maybe Buddhism, shamanism have played a very important role in that kind of attitude toward nature and environment. But that has been radically changed during this era of economic development. So, and then I would say that we have kind of internalized this developmentalism. Developmentalism initially was a kind of government program, the government policy, but because we've been kind of adopting these ideas, and we have become so deeply infiltrated in this kind of ideas. So, for example, tidal land and mudflat, gapbol in Korean, of West Coast, because there is like a very huge area of tidal flat in the west seashore of Korea, which are very important in terms of ecological diversity and the lives of the local fishermen in the community. But this has been seen as kind of wasteland that should be developed. And maybe some of you might know, but Saemangum reclamation, this is the largest reclaiming project of the wetland on this in Korea, and these were very important in terms of biodiversity. It's like all kind of birds and fishes and other clams are living in this particular part of wetland. But for the purpose of economic development, it was like has changed into like flat land. It's like they're trying to build all kind of like facilities. But at the moment, it's like kind of, it didn't really get too far, even though it was reclaimed into flat land. And but it kind of completely destroyed this ecosystem and the local fishermen's life and community. But that's kind of like shows that how we have come to view the nature, and there are some concerns and there are some efforts to change this kind of social values in Korea. Well, very simple mathematics, if you will, formula when we think about environmental issues. The mechanisms of environmental problem, environmental burden, impact. I represents environmental impact. P, population. A, affluence. T, technology. So, number of people, the wealth or high income, and technology, the three variables will lead to environmental impact. That means, okay, if there is a growth of population, there will be more or less environmental impact. Is it more, less? Which one? More, yes. Okay. If there's population growth, the total impact on environment will grow. Okay, because people will, eat more and like spend more and everything else. The people are a very important variable. Second variable is affluence. If you are rich, that if you have more money, you will be buying things. You'll be driving like BMW with like very big engines and so on. You'll be using more, maybe. I know that Americans are using a lot more water than Koreans, or maybe people in India, because Americans are like take shower every day, and like and they don't really care about. Many Americans do not really care about how much water they, in general, I would say. So on average, Jay, okay, am I okay? Yeah. So in general, on average, the per capita consumption of water is extremely high for American. So there is a kind of joke, I think, not a joke. Lester Brown, one of the famous environmental researcher in the world, has said that there are many ways that the Earth could be collapsed, will be destroyed by Chinese. That is, I mean, I'm not trying to say that Chinese are bad, but what he's trying to say is that the population is very high. So actually this kind of critique of American consumerism, he said, if Chinese begin to use the cars as much as the Americans, that will be end of the world. Because I think like almost 2 people have 1 car in the US, and they're driving a lot, like, they go to the supermarket, they will be driving here and there. And if Chinese 13 billion, right, 1.3 billion, 1.4 billion people begin to drive like Americans, that will be a major disaster in terms of the environment. So Lester Brown is trying to like criticize this American consumerism, like they said in the cars and like other in terms of energy consumption, very inefficient. Whereas maybe Japanese are much more frugal in terms of the energy consumption, more sustainable, and so on. So population on the one hand is important, but at the same time, how much a person consumes is important, because often with the money, they would be like consuming a lot, bigger cars and like all kind of materials that may be a problem in terms of ecological system. And technology, like that is, if you have a better technology, eco-friendly, if you have hybrid car, that's much better than like a gasoline car that uses like a cylinder engine, right? So technology could actually contribute in terms of the environmental, reducing environmental impact. This is what basically I'm trying to say. Affluence, that's one of the important variables for environmental impact, right? It's like purchasing power. It's like it's potential to consume more. We, the modern people, consume a lot more than non-modern people. So this, in general, in every industrialized society, we begin to consume a lot more than we did. And we can ask, do we really need this consumption? So there's like some people, experts differentiate want versus needs. We have basic needs for food and like all kind of housing and clothing and so on. But in modern society, this socially constructed want become very important. Want, in a sense, is kind of unlimited because of the advertisement. Modern consumerism and advertisement continue to encourage people to spend more and spend more and spend more. without really thinking that whether it's really something that we need, do we really need this, right? And so that's kind of theoretical argument that that environmentalists would present in criticizing modern consumerism. And I think many Koreans have become very addicted to this kind of consumerism, and many Koreans begin to really think that, well, I want more bigger apartment, bigger cars. It's not always bad, but I think we have to really, question that whether this is something that we really need, whether this kind of want is being, induced by the advertisement and modern consumer culture. So I think, in general, I would say that green consumption, ethical consumption, all this kind of consumption at individual level could be important. Okay, so let's try to take an example of automobile. I think that's kind of cars. It's something that is really important part of modern development. And in Korea, the number of cars, of course, has been increasing very rapidly. Automobile was something that was not really part of our lifestyle until mid-1980s, and then as middle class began to grow, we begin to, use cars, buy cars. The number of cars was about 10 million in 1997. It grew to 15 or 16 million in 2006, and as of this year, about 18.6 million cars in Korea. It's about 2.1 car per 2.7 people, I think, yeah. 1 car per 2.7 people. Quite a lot of cars, many cars in Korea. And of course, it's convenient, but at the same time, we have to say that this is a source of air pollution. Okay, more cars on the street. Of course, there has been effort to reduce the air pollution by using green energy, especially the public station, the bus in Korea. In Seoul, for example, it's kind of great success in the sense that we have eliminated many diesel buses and then changed that into natural gas, which is much less polluting the city of Seoul. That's good. Most polluted world cities by particulate matter, small items. And Egypt, I never been to Cairo, but looks like the situation is quite bad. Cairo, Delhi, Calcutta, Tianjin, Cheongjin, Kanpur, Lucknow, Jakarta, Shenyang. Okay, these are countries which have great problem with environment, especially PM10, particulate matter, small, which could be very bad for your breathing and so on. Seoul at the bottom, it's 58 microgram per cubic meter air. So New York is much better, London is much better, Tokyo is much better. So Korea, Seoul, is not the worst in the world, but still compared to other major cities or capitals of the world, such as New York, London, and Tokyo, I mean, these cities are not probably the best in that country. I would say many cities in the US is much better than New York City. I would say other cities in UK, other cities in London is much better. I would say other cities in Japan, other than Tokyo, is much better. But still, New York, London, and Tokyo are much better than Seoul. So even though the city of Seoul has been trying to reduce or solve this air pollution problem, it's comparatively speaking, there is some problem. This shows some it's kind of more microscopic view of air pollution in Korea. Seoul, Incheon, Busan, Daegu, Gwangju, and Daejeon, Ulsan. Incheon and Seoul is quite bad in terms of PM. In terms of nitrogen oxides, which stems from mostly automobiles, Seoul is not that good. Okay, whereas if you see the Daejeon and Gwangju, they are much better in terms of nitrogen. Or in regard to sulfur oxides, which is actually comes from the factory, emitted from factories, Seoul is much better because there are less factories in Seoul, whereas Ulsan, for example, which is an industrial city, have much higher sulfur oxides. So we can say that because of, on the one hand, automobiles, we have high PM and nitrogen in many parts of Korea. Seoul is a bit better than other cities. Bad is worse than other cities. As for factories are located in kind of industrial cities, but they are worse in sulfur oxides, whereas Seoul is better because there's less factories in Korea. Okay, I guess we'll have to call for this class to the Fudan University student, right? Okay, thank you for attending, and we'll see you next week. 再见。明星期天 Does that make sense? 明星 No? Okay. 다음 주에 보자. Okay, all right. I need a great improvement. Okay, bye-bye.